We had some technical difficulties as we was wrapping up the episode. We was talking about the J. Cole album, and audio files got distorted, and so I happened to be the only one who got around to listening to the J. Cole album, and so I wanted to make it a point to give my first listen analysis on this episode. I'm sure next week we'll come back and talk about it some more as my brothers get around to listening to it and come back and give their opinion. But I want to make sure I gave my first listen analysis as a J. Cole fan, and him being like my favorite artist of all time. Like I said, I want to give my analysis on my just off my first listen of the album. I still been living with the album, still been listening to it throughout the week. But I'm going to do my best to stay in or give my mind frame and how I felt about the album as I was listening to it for the first time. That being said, to start off with my analysis, I would have to say I did not get the opportunity to listen to the album my first listening to it completely uninterrupted all the way from top to bottom. I hate that I hadn't been able to do that, but I didn't want to try to wait for quote unquote the perfect time to try to listen to the album, and time flies and I still ain't heard it. So I was listening to it bit by bit, piece by piece when I can. Stop, get busy, have to handle this, have to do that, come back into it, pick up where I left off. And so that's kind of where you could, I guess that's like the start or the foundation of like me only listening to it one time. Um, Maybe listen to three, four, maybe five songs at a time. Then, like I say, get caught up doing something and have to come back. Maybe go back and listen to some, then listen to another five. So it hasn't been completely uninterrupted listen. So you may or may not like my take on the album for saying that, and my take on the album could be, I guess, a bit jaded because I wasn't able to process it and take it all in at one complete time. But nonetheless, listening to the album, first listen, opinion of it, I think the second half of the album, Disc 39, I think it is way better than Disc 29. Obviously, music is subjective. I'm curious as to know how many of y'all out there either agree with me or feel like Disc 29, the first half of the album, you would prefer that half of the album over the second half of the album. But me personally, first listen, I don't think it's close. I think Disc 39, I think it gets Disc 29 up out of here. I really do. The 39 intro song, the rapping on that was my favorite part of the album. I feel like Cole should have opened up with really Disc 39. Like, open up the album with Disc 39 and like let's rock out. I did not like the sequencing of the album. It's starting with, Disc 29, which obviously I wasn't the biggest fan of. I didn't like the sequencing of the album. Could I feel different in that once I'm able to actually process the album and listen to it all the way through uninterrupted? Maybe, possibly, but off a first time listen, was not a fan of the sequencing of the album. And I also feel like too that there are some skips on the album. Some people could take it as a slight. Some may feel like that is utterly disrespectful to say that this album, being J. Cole's, in his opinion, his best body of work, to say that it has skips, some could deem that to be utterly disrespectful. But that's just my opinion off my first listen. And in feeling like the album has skips, it made me wonder if an album can be deemed a classic if it has skips. Can an album be a classic if it has skips? And so as I was just listening to the album, I was just like, I don't really care for this song. It's cool, I guess. Maybe it'll grow on me, maybe it won't. I'm not eager to go back and listen to it or replay it or what have you. Yeah, so I think of my first listen, the album does have skips. And does that take away from it potentially growing and developing into being a classic? overall, listening to the album, I felt like it was a huge thank you. Like I feel like the album. I don't know how exactly I want to articulate it, but the album to me in its entirety, I feel like was a thank you letter to hip hop, and I got that from like all the samples that I was hearing. Though it was like my first listen, and like I say, I didn't listen to it completely uninterrupted all the way through. I heard a lot of samples with the beats. I heard a lot of flow references from various artists, and I feel like that was J. Cole's way of just paying homage to hip hop and the artists and songs that influenced him throughout his career. And also too, I think he made an extremely conscious effort in in thanking hip hop. I also believe he made a conscious effort to simultaneously make sure he paid homage and tribute to Fayetteville, his hometown, and kind of just being like, hey, no matter how far people try to put me up on this pedestal of being this superstar, I'll never forget where I came from, that being Fayetteville. And so I think that was the overall sentiment and tone of this album, is, letting Fayetteville, his hometown, know, like, I'll never forget where I came from, but also making sure, with this being quote unquote his last album, making sure he paid his proper respects to hip hop and all of its influence on J. Cole personally and as an artist. So yeah, do I think this is going to be J. Cole's last album? Listening to the album when I finally finished it, that was one of the first. I don't want to even say the first thought. I felt like listening to the album, as I was listening to the album, I felt like this isn't Cole's last album. I feel like Cole exemplified him being in his like final form of being able to rap and produce songs at his absolute best. It's just like, how do you say that this is your last album when, like, one could argue you're just not entering your prime with this album, right? And so even though I feel like the song had skips, though I wasn't a fan of like the sequencing, I still think it was a really good body of work that J. Cole put out. I will say that. I'm not sure. I'm not ready to pull the trigger on like whether it's a classic or not, because maybe just off fandom, I guess you could say, or maybe recency bias, I'll still say Forest Hills Drive is just one of those. I feel like just let it play, and I don't necessarily feel like just let it play with the fall off. Like I say, it has skips, and that's just off again. Prefacing my very first listen of the album. Um, but yeah, J. Cole's saying that it's his last album. I don't believe him. What I think is, now that he no longer has a contractual obligation to produce X amount of albums, I think J. Cole personally no longer wants to have the expectation to release a project hovering over his head. And so, in order to kill the expectation from the fans, he says, hey, this is his last album. Therefore, we shouldn't expect nothing from him. And the 24 songs that he gave us throughout the course of the album is his way of being like, hey, I hope this holds you over until I release another project. And it may be a while, of course, but I still don't think this is his last album. And I think the 24 songs, also when listening to them, I feel like the 24 songs, they were a compiled of, it could have possibly been like 2 albums and maybe a mixtape worth of music within those 24 songs. And I feel like, again, because J. Cole may be like over the expectation of having to like put out albums and go through all that comes with that, as opposed to him releasing the 2, maybe a mixtape worth of, though compiled with those 24 songs, releasing that within the course of like 2 to 3 years. He want to be like, hey, I'm tired of this. I'm giving y'all this all at once. I'm washing my hands with it. It is no longer an obligation or responsibility of me to provide the masses with music. I'm telling y'all, this is my last one again to curve and kill y'all expectation of ever expecting something from me. And because we shouldn't be expecting nothing from him with the announcement that this is his last one, it completely removes him from pressure of feeling like again he has to provide us with music and meet deadlines and like all that comes with that. So I think it was just him just killing just the expectation and allowing him to go forth and live his life however he sees fit freely without having to be worried about producing an album. But knowing J. Cole the way I believe to know J. Cole through his music and how much music plays a part in his life and how much he's inspired to use his pen, I for those reasons I believe J. Cole is going to eventually release another project. So I'm not really too hung up on like, oh man, this is really his last one. I'll bet the house on Cole releasing another project in the near future. So yeah, man, that's pretty much like my overall take of the off the first listen of the album. Again, let me know if y'all prefer the 39 intro or 39 disc 39, the second half of the album over the first half of which half of the album do y'all believe was better? Me personally, again, I think the second half of the album was better, disc 39, and do you agree with me that the album has skips? And if you do think the album has skips, do you think that disqualifies it from being considered a classic amongst the masses? Of course, you're going to always have your cult classics, but do you think that takes away from it having the opportunity to be considered a classic amongst the masses? I want to close with this, though. Talking about still feeling like though feeling like the album has skips, still feeling like Cole put together a good body of work with the songs that he put out there. I want to highlight what I believe to be, and maybe this is considered to be a hot take. What's an album review without a hot take, I guess. But I don't I don't even feel like it has to be, but whatever. Let's just say it's a hot take, right? The rapping, specifically the rapping that J. Cole, Jermaine Cole, the rapping that J. Cole displayed on 39 intro, I believe it to be God level flow, the best for rapping in verse that J. Cole has ever rapped in his entire career. Yes, I feel that way. That is a song that song itself, I believe, makes up for the skips on the album. And is there anybody else out there who can share that sentiment with me? Because the rapping on 39 intro was just, like I said, picture of the dictionary, God level flow. J. Cole's like Goku reaching his final form of like rapping. I was just like taken aback. I'm talking about like when you listen to that verse and the way he's rapping on there, like once you get past the singing and the melodic beat and then it breaks down into the next beat and he just start going into like another unworldly planet of rapping. I'm talking about it's like Kobe getting his 2 rings without Shaq. Kobe getting 60 in his last game. We talking Allen Iverson crossing over Jordan, then stepping over Tyronn Lue. That's how that verse make you feel. That's how that verse like make you look when you, like the look on your face you get when you hearing it. We talking Dame game 1 over Paul George. You feel me? We talking Tom Brady comeback versus the Atlanta Falcons, and then getting his ring versus the Bucks. That is where I believe J. Cole actually went with that verse. We talking Giannis 50 in a closeout game of the finals. We talking Jordan shrug with the 6 threes versus Portland. We talking Jordan crossover over Russell in the finals. That's what we talking about. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that type of flow from J. Cole. And then Jordan went to North Carolina. We talking Jordan game winner in the NCAA championship with the level of rapping J. Cole was putting on display. Do you hear me? I'm talking about Asia game winner in Phoenix in the finals. Like that look Asia had on her face, like that's the type of, that's how I felt when I was listening to that J. Cole verse. You know what I mean? Like that's how I felt. You feel me? Can go on and on. Bron 25 straight points in '07 versus the Pistons. Better yet, Bron block on equal dollar, and then Kyrie's 3 over Steph. That's what that verse was. You hear Cleveland, this is for you. Fayetteville, this is for you. That's, yeah, man. Like that's just like that's what that verse was, man. That's why I deem it to be J. Cole's best verse of his career. And I don't, like, you may find some verses out there that could rival it, but I think that verse right there specifically, that style of rapping, yeah, man. Like, that's how I feel about that verse, man. Is there anybody out there who shares that sentiment? And is there anybody out there who think I'm crazy for even putting that as one of his best verses of all time?
The doors of the pod are open.